Yeah, welcome to this session. So let's go ahead and start, I guess. So I think we'll start as usual with a little meditation and generate positive motivation. And then, yeah, I'll explain the plan for tonight. And then I think, what I think what my idea for tonight is to, we'll just review briefly what we went over and meditated on last week. Um, and then mainly meditate on dependent arising, how as a person we're a dependently arising phenomena, because that's the main antidote to the ignorance that's the cause of samsara, which we looked at last week. Um, and it's the main kind of gateway to generate an understanding of emptiness. Um, yeah, so that's what we'll focus on tonight. Um, yeah, so get comfortable in your meditation posture. Let me silence my phone. Yeah. Mm. And gradually focus your attention inwards. Briefly scan through your body, check if there's any discomfort and release any tension or stress. And then gradually focus your attention on, yeah, become aware of the state of your own mind. And spend a few minutes focusing your attention on an object of placement meditation. Mm. And if you like, visualize yourself surrounded by all sentient beings. And yeah, reflect on your interconnectedness with them, especially in the ways we do, and in order to generate bodhicitta, thinking of the kindness of all sentient beings for oneself. Mm. Yeah, and then generate a positive motivation for this session, especially attitude of bodhicitta, thinking in order to use one's life to benefit other sentient beings, and also, by the way, be of the greatest benefit to oneself. Then the importance of meditating on and generating deeper and deeper realization of dependent arising and emptiness as the most fundamental antidote to one's own selfish concern and afflictive emotions, anger and attachment, and other afflictive emotions. Mm. And then we'll recite the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha and the verse of refuge. Great. So if you like, you can visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front and and then generate, um, yeah, the mind of refuge and the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Compelled by great compassion, you taught the sacred Dharma to dispel all wrong views. To you, the Gautama Buddha, I pay homage. Do not commit any unwholesome actions. Engage in perfect wholesome actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And then you can offer a short mandala offering in English. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as the Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. And then we'll skip to just the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. I take refuge until I am enlightened, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit transmigratory beings. Hmm. So then we'll continue. So let me see. Yeah, last week we're looking at this verse by from Nagarjuna. Mm, yeah, we were meditating on this. So looking at this last week, yeah, we were looking at this, and the week before actually. Um, yeah, in the reverse order is the kind of the main order here. We were looking at it how beginning with suffering, thinking how yeah, we and other sentient beings have suffering experiences. Then why, why did those arise again and again? Um, and then yeah, reflecting how those arise due to karma. Uh, and then, well, why does karma arise? That karma we, especially negative karma, but karma in general, arises from engaging in actions motivated by afflictive emotions like anger, attachment, and then with which both arise from a selfish, self-centered attitude, which arises from ignorance. So then afflictive emotions arise from these inaccurate concepts, and we spend a lot of time talking about, what inaccurate concepts means or false conceptions. It's in the verse, which are basically exaggerated ways of perceiving things that we see as attractive, exaggerating their attractiveness, and grasping at that as being a property of the object itself, irrespective of our own way of relating to the object. And then the same on the side of, anger and unattractive objects. And then how that believing in that kind of false perception of things, then when it becomes more emotionally intense, gives rise to afflictive emotions. So that, but both of those types of inaccurate concepts, grasping at things as being overly positive or attractive or unattractive, they both, and then also kind of feeling that we, to be happy ourselves, we need to have things that are attractive. We need to be totally separated from or destroy things that we perceive as unpleasant, unattractive. So with inaccurate concepts, there's both a reification of the objects that we perceive and also of ourselves as the perceiver. And we see those two as like existing each from their own side. Objects having their own kind of independent reality, and us, the perceiver, also having our own kind of independent reality. Um, just being as we are, just because we're like that, without that kind of thinking like that's just the way I am, irrespective of anything else. There's some kind of concrete, um, independent reality to that, or truth, a fundamental truth to perceiving us to ourselves existing in just the way we perceive ourselves, and other things existing in just the way we perceive them. Right? So we exaggerate the independent nature of things. Um, and so those inaccurate concepts arise both from this ignorance, specific kind of ignorance, grasping at things existing from their own sides or inherently existing. And so, yeah, once again, I'll just read the verse to review. But by exhausting karma and afflictions, one is liberated. So, how do we gain ultimate peace, freedom from samsara? By exhausting karma and afflictive emotions through abandoning their antidotes. Karma and afflictive emotions come from false conceptions or inaccurate concepts. And then those conceptions come from elaboration of inherent existence. So they're both inaccurate, or those false conceptions come from self-grasping, you can say, or grasping at inherent existence. As for that elaboration, it is ceased by emptiness or ceased in emptiness. So that's the main thing where we want to work on, is developing this antidote, emptiness, which eliminates ignorance. So to do that, I want to work on today on recognizing or independent arising, and then trying to generate a stronger awareness of dependent arising. So before they do that, though, I'll just read a couple verses from sutras that relate to that and the importance of meditating on emptiness. So here it's from the sutra Cultivating Faith in the Mahayana. So the Buddha says, I do not say that those who have faith in the Mahayana Bodhisattvas, unless they have wisdom, are delivered, no matter what Mahayana practices they do. So here the Buddha is saying, even if we do all kinds of other practices, like meditation to generate single pointed concentration, or meditate on loving kindness and compassion, or we accumulate a lot of mantras, or practice perfect guru devotion, that no matter what other practices we do, unless we have wisdom, we won't be delivered. It means we won't free ourselves or be able to free others from suffering. So that's what. So it's imperative to realize emptiness. So what the Buddha is saying, I do not say that those who have faith in the Mahayana of Bodhisattvas, unless they have wisdom, are delivered, right? So you cannot be delivered unless you have wisdom, no matter what Mahayana practices they can do. Um, yeah, this is quoted by Lama Tsongkhapa in the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. And then another verse he quotes. This is from the King of Concentration Sutra, um, yeah, which is available for free download online. And here it says, if you analytically discern the lack of self in phenomena, and if you cultivate that analysis in meditation, this will cause the result, attainment of nirvana. There is no peace through any other means. So he's making the same point that through any other means of practice, yes, one can reduce one's suffering to some degree and have more happiness in the mind and in one's life, but one cannot achieve the irreversible state of peace of nirvana, whereby um, all of the disturbing emotions and the seeds of those disturbing emotions are completely eliminated in such a way that they'll never arise in the mind again. So that nirvana can only be achieved through realizing emptiness. So again, when he says, if you analytically discern the lack of self in phenomena, and if you cultivate that analysis in meditation, so he's very explicitly mentioning analytical meditation. If you cultivate that analysis in meditation, this will cause the result, attainment of nirvana. There is no peace through any other means. So that's what we'll work on today is, um, the different steps of analytical meditation on emptiness. Yeah, and then finally this one verse before we meditate on dependent arising, where the Buddha explicitly speaks about the importance um, of dependent of meditating on dependent arising and how that's a gateway kind of to understanding emptiness. So here it says, this is from the Rice Seedling Sutra. So here Buddha says, Venerable bhikshus, whoever sees dependent and relative origination sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. What is this dependent and relative origination of which I speak? It is this. Because this exists, that arises. Because that is born, this is born. So here, yeah, the Buddha's saying um, that if one realizes the dependent origination, then one sees the Dharma. Here, the Dharma, we can think of the Dharma as basically the ultimate truth or fundamental truth of things, how things exist. Um, and yeah, essentially we can think of it means emptiness here, that it's, yeah, by realizing dependent origination, then one sees the truth of how things exist, emptiness. Whoever sees Dharma, sees emptiness, sees the Buddha, because that is the nature, the ultimate nature of the Buddha, and because of any Buddha, and because that's mainly what the Buddha's mind is realizing, right? That's how for any enlightened being, that's how they become enlightened, how they've eliminated all the afflictive emotions, um, and yeah, the subtle obscurations, and how they become enlightened is primarily by meditating on emptiness in conjunction with the attitude of the altruistic attitude of great compassion, wishing to be of the greatest possible benefit to all sentient beings. So those two combine together, like the two wings of a bird. Mm. But to really understand the nature of a Buddha, one has to realize both of those things, great compassion and emptiness. But especially here, because of the four bodies of the Buddha, one of the bodies is explicitly just the Buddha's emptiness, or a Buddha's emptiness of inherent existence. Yeah, so he says, Venerable Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent and relative origination sees the Dharma. So there he's explicitly saying, like, the way to understand the ultimate truth, to understand emptiness, is to consider dependent arising. And then whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So then he goes on to say, well, what is this dependent and relative origination of which I speak? So, yeah, what is this dependent and relative origination of what I speak? What do I mean by dependent arising? It is this. Because this exists, that arises. Because that is born, this is born. So this is primarily speaking about um, mainly one type of dependent origination, right? So there's three main types of dependent origination. Um, that things exist, as it says here, in dependence upon causes and conditions. So we'll look at that first. And then that things exist upon parts. And that one applies to all, right? Whereas existence and dependence upon causes and conditions is only true of impermanent phenomena. Things existing in dependence upon parts is true of all phenomena. And then the third type of dependent origination is things existing in dependence upon mental imputation. And that also applies to all phenomena. But I won't try to explain all of those now. Let's just look at the first one, the one that Buddha mentions here, existence and depends upon causes and conditions, and then meditate on that a bit. Um, yeah, maybe, yeah, I'll just keep it simple. We just, well, we can think of in relation, we'll meditate on first in relation to ourselves as a person. But just thinking about ourselves as a person, like, um, yeah, maybe a more one immediate way to look at how we exist in dependence upon causes and conditions is just to look at the present. In the present moment, we're continually changing, right? We're breathing. And as we breathe, we're taking oxygen from the air into our bloodstream and expelling carbon dioxide and other waste products you can think from our cells back into our breath, which we pass out into the atmosphere. Also, our bodies are changing, moment by moment. Our bodies are aging. Every cell in our body is, as I mean, also there's continual movement in our bodies now. From with our breathing, our lungs and diaphragm move. Our heart is continually beating, and our heart is beating in order to move blood throughout our bodies, um, in order to nourish all of our cells with oxygen from our air and also with the energy that we from digestion. And so so every cell in our body is performing different functions continually. And then those cells are all made up of different molecules. Those molecules are made up of atoms. At the level of atom, we know this continuum movement because the center of each atom is a nucleus made up of protons and neutrons, and those are orbited by electrons. Um, and then we can also, think of all the other types of movement in our body, in our bodies. There's hormones, there's muscles tensing and relaxing. Um, there's electric signals, moving through our nervous system and so forth. So in all of that movement, with each movement, we know movement doesn't just happen, um, for no reason at all, but there's some kind of some kind of transaction happening, some kind of different forces at work that cause movement to happen. So that's one type of, causation is, um, one action leads to, another reaction. So we can observe just in the present moment, right, how there's um, different actions, different things giving rise to different effects. So, like our heart beating each moment is giving rise to an effect of blood moving, through our bodies. And then there's, that we have body heat, right? That's something that doesn't just, it's continually being produced, or else it just dissipates, right? So our bodies are maintained at a comfortable temperature, and that's through the action of that's an effect, right, of the what do you call metabolism of cells in our body. Mm. So just look at, yeah, just observe your own physical body and recognize how, it's continually changing in the present moment. Yeah. And how each change, all those, infinite changes that are occurring in our body from moment to moment, they um, they arise through the force of, or they entail causation, you know, different, like, so each, it's like, mm, think on the level of one cell, like each moment of a cell, the action that occurs in that cell in that moment is a cause for the immediate subsequent moment, and then that's a cause for the subsequent moment, and that's a cause for the subsequent moment, right? So each moment, no matter how small a moments you think of, whether it's 1 second or half a second or a quarter of a second or 1/100th or 1,000th or 1 millionth of a second, at each moment, each part of our body, every part of our body actually, is a cause producing, contributing to the production of the immediate successive moment, right? So we can think of every part of our body, from the large, parts like our head, our arms, our torso, organs, down to, the scale of the individual cells, down to the scale of the molecules and atoms, down to the scale of even the subatomic particles. Every single part of our body, there is are from their causes, right? Interacting with other parts of the body and thereby producing effects. And then those effects themselves produce effects, and so forth. So try to get a sense of that, how just as the Buddha says here. No? What is this dependent and relative origination of which I speak? It is this, because this exists. So here I can think of all the different parts of our body, because they exist as they are now, then that exists. Then their immediate effects, those exist as they are. Right. Because this is born, that is born. Also, he's pointing out, like, there's a pattern to change. It's not just that, like, any causes produce any effects. Like, why our bodies don't radically change shape through our lives, right? We more or less look, you know, similar. Also, our bodies are not like radically different from the bodies of our parents, because they're effects of the bodies of our parents. So, even though every cell in our body is replaced like every 8 years or something like that, but it's not like our bodies become completely different than before. There's a pattern to change, because a certain set of causes, they only have the ability to produce effects that are similar to themselves, right? Certain types of effects. Mhm. And then also, it's the same with our minds. So look at your mind in the present moment. Mhm. And look at how much change is happening each moment. And then again, the same reasoning applies with each moment of our awareness is an effect of the causes that immediately preceded it, and also the causes that preceded that and preceded that and preceded that, right? Both the direct and the indirect causes give rise to each moment of awareness. And then each moment of awareness, which is an effect of the causes that preceded it, it itself is a cause which produces successive moment of awareness. So just observe the present moment, how awareness is emerging, with as time unfolds in the present moment. As something that is different, with each moment, our awareness is different than it was in just the moment before, but not radically different. Mm, mm. So we can ask one question we can ask ourselves is there any part of me that is not um, a cause um, and an effect? Actually, cause and effect are one meaning, right? Anything, because anything that's a cause is also an effect. Anything that's an effect is also a cause. So, but we can ask, is there any part of myself as a person that's not changing moment to moment? Mm. And therefore, is there any part of myself as a person that's not an effect of the causes that preceded it? Mm. And finally, is there any part of, we can ask ourselves, is there any part of myself as a person that's not a cause of the effects that arise subsequent to it in each moment? Mm. So now let's relate this kind of awareness of how, as a person, we're thoroughly made up of, infinite causes and effects, which are continually unfolding through time. So how do we relate that to emptiness a little bit? Um, One is, I think we meditated just for a couple of minutes last week at the end of the session on something similar, but it's looking how we as a person, how we're continually unfolding in time, as we're looking at now. And so we can ask, as a person, okay, how, I mean, the larger question is, how do I exist? So in looking at, we exist as something dependent upon infinite causes and conditions. And this is not even without thinking about our distant past, right? Just looking at the present moment. There's a whole lot more like causes and conditions when we look at our distant past, right? But just staying with the present moment for the time. Think about, I mean, what we want to look is how, yeah, in how do we exist in the present moment? Like just when we, like 5 minutes ago, there was think of oneself. There was the self, you, that had joined this session, how many? 40 minutes ago, and then had been listening for 35 minutes. And then 5 minutes ago was just meditating on, I think, I don't know, the mind, how the mind is changing. But now that's the past. So, and we've changed from 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago. We've changed now. Because we're similar to that person, then we think of ourselves as the same person. But actually, when you look at in a detailed way, it's like every cell in our body has changed. The quality of our attention, the objects appearing to our mind have changed. Even some thoughts and maybe perceptions in our mind are different. We might be, more tired or more energized, whatever. We feel a little different. Not radically different, but a little. So that person of, 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, even just 30 seconds ago, it's become part of the past, right? But we're in the present now. And the future us, even just a short future, like the future of us 5 seconds from now, or 10 seconds from now, or 1 minute from now, it hasn't yet arisen. It's not sure quite how that one will be. So we only exist um, as something that's not past, and that's not just, a hypothetical in the future, in the present moment. But then what is the nature of the present moment? It's totally unstable. It's because we're changing. Every part of our body is changing. Our mind, every part of our mind is changing. So then the question is becomes like when we say I, we think like I'm meditating now on dependent arising, cause and effects, and how I exist. But that I was meditating like, what is that? Where is that? It's not in the future because that hasn't arisen yet. It's not in the past because that's gone. That's in the past. We're existing in the present. And in the present, like what is there we can pinpoint and say, this is I. This is the I who started this session. This is the I who will end this session. This is the I who woke up this morning, who still exists now and will, go to sleep tonight. Like, and if we look in the present moment, what is there we can point to? Say, there's that I. It's not that we can't point to anything and say there's the I, but whatever we point to, it's changing. Mm. Okay, so relax your attention, uh, yeah, for a bit. And if you have are there any questions about any of those things? We're about halfway through our time already.
I have a question about emptiness and when somebody realize emptiness, like uh, can we say that at that moment the
This
karma
is
we
a
don't
question for you.
create karma?
Oh, well, I was asking a lot of open-ended questions without really giving the answers. I mean, not that there's answers, but when I asked you all, I was wondering, when I asked you, well, first of all, is there any part of your body you can find that's not changing continually? Did any of you find a part of your body and say, oh, well, that one I think is not changing?
No.
No?
How about my hair? It's
That's,
not,
that's good. I mean, there shouldn't be.
my hair is not
With the
growing.
body, it's relatively easy, no, because we can, it's physical stuff. No, clearly it's changing. Um, yeah. What about the mind? Usually the mind, there's a stronger sense. There's some part of it that's not changing.
I'd like to say it seems like almost the observer himself,
When you
the
looked at,
observer.
when you asked that question with relation to your own mind, is there any part of the mind that's not continually changing? Was there any aspect of it that appeared like, yeah, that's not changing? Or did it appear more like, yeah, every part of it is changing without excluding any?
I think that's correct. It is changing all the time. I was going to refer to the
Dan,
observer.
are you talking? I can't hear you.
I'm
Oh, hold
sorry.
on. I think is my mic muted or something? Stan, can you?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank
I
you.
should have put up my hand perhaps, but
Oh no, it's my mistake here. I had my speakers muted.
yeah, I was thinking about the actual observer of all this change that's going on, but that observer is changing all the time as well. I mean, with the information you've given just tonight, that observer is changing and significantly. So I guess to your question, yes, everything is changing, even the
Mhm.
observer um, that's there. It seems to be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. No, it does make sense. And that is, I mean, it's like the fact that we have a mind, that's not changing. Right? Just the fact that we are aware moment by moment is not changing. Although, when we go to sleep, it's like it's not sure what happens. We still have a mind, but We don't perceive, like the observer, is it present when we're in deep sleep, for example? I
I
don't know.
I think so, but because I remember my dreams, and it seems like something was there to experience
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
No, that's true. For dreams, for sure. No question there's an observer of the dreams, but there are periods when we're not dreaming, right?
Yes.
When we're
Right.
in deep sleep and there's no dream, right?
Right.
But even in those periods, even in that, those periods when we're in deep sleep, we're dreaming. I think if someone were to shake us enough, we would wake up, which is an indication that there's some awareness there. Um, also, it is the case that like if we need to wake up at a particular time, like in the night or in the morning, if we set an intention very strongly before we go to sleep to wake up at a particular time, then we will, right? For the most part, which indicates that there is some level of awareness. Also, just the fact that we're not dead, right? Why aren't we dead when we're asleep? Because we have a mind still that's inhabiting our body, right? So there is some level of awareness. But but this idea, I like your comment about, yeah, I mean, the question, well, that there's an observer continually present. So is it maybe the fact that we have that there is an observer, is that not changing? But then you observed, Stan, that well, but the observer itself is changing moment by moment. That's a very important point because imagine the alternative, like if the observer, because when we think, well, what am I as the person? Usually, well, we are an observer. That's one of the primary things we do as a person is observe things, right? And so that's what we associate with this I, the observer, right? But imagine like if that observer that we are, if that existed just by its own power or from its own side, without relying upon anything else, if its existence was produced and maintained by something just its own thing, so its own just functions in and of like that are unique to itself without depending upon anything that's not the observer, right? Then then actually that type of observer, if it was totally independent, it wouldn't be able to observe. It wouldn't be able uh, to connect with anything else. It wouldn't be able to observe any objects because with each act of observation, the observer changes, right? It's just by having the conversation we're having now, you've changed and I've also changed, and everyone is becoming changed. Now we're all different people. With each moment of experience, the observer changes, right? And that change is not happening by anything. I mean, the observer is contributing the act of being aware, but to be aware, there has to be something that they're aware of. There has to be a subject, the object that they're aware of. No, so like just to function as an observer, the observer has to be empty of existing from their own side, right? In order to be in order to be able to be affected by other things, right? And the act of observation is to be affected by other things, right? It's to change. If the observer wasn't changing moment by moment, it couldn't interact with other things, right? So that's I mean that's a very important thing to notice how like it's because we're empty of a kind of autonomous existence that we're able to interact with others. No, and it's not just us as a person that we're like that. Every phenomena, you know, that's why phenomena are empty in a way. It's because I mean that's why the interaction of phenomena with each other, it proves that they do not exist from their own side, right? Because the alternative is that if like if I existed from my own side, then I wouldn't be able to have a conversation with you, right? And if you existed from your own side, you wouldn't be able to have a conversation with me because as soon as we have a conversation, we change into people that have heard one another, right? We everything's yeah, we change in relation to things. So just the fact that we can have a meal, we can take a breath, that we any kind of change, because we always change through the influence of other things on us, and we also influence other things, right? Yeah, I don't know. Did anyone else have kind of want to share some yeah, your experience relating to these different questions that I was posing you?
If I could just, I, I guess I think what I hear you saying is something that I understanding from the other class, which is consciousness sees moving things, right? And so the fact that there's a moving thing means consciousness changes is what you're, I mean, I'm repeating what you're saying, but it's almost in a sense like the car isn't
Mhm.
moving across the street, even though I'm observing it. My consciousness is constantly changing, observing different car moments that it perceives. Even though the car physically moves, I don't experience it. I'm just a changing consciousness. The consciousness is changing all the time, picking up on the things in the world everywhere. So from,
Mhm.
you know, that's, I don't know. Sorry. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
consciousness is changing all the time. Yeah, that's the basic point. You know, David Hume actually discusses this in one of his books. He gives the analogy of like I think he talks about a ship. He's probably sitting at a port city writing somewhere. But he was talking about, I mean, but it works for just us as a person also. But it's like you think of every moment that in the continuum of the ship, each, you think of it's aging continually. So every moment is different than the previous one, right? But then why do you call it one ship? Is because the moments, the different moments, they're similar to one another in a continuum of that object. And so the mind, it doesn't see those individual moments that are different. It sees the continuum and the similarity between the individual moments and then labels the entire thing as one ship, that this ship is in port for like 1 month. No, it's like the same ship, although actually it's not. If you look for the same ship that's identical ship that's in port for 1 month, you can't find it. Right, what you find is individual moments, each is different from the next slightly, right? And so as a person, we're just the same. Yeah, Heraclitus said you never step into the same river twice. Exactly. Yeah, it's the same observation by Heraclitus. You never like someone doesn't step into the same river twice. The river is changing, also the person is changing, right? But it's because like like we think, oh, I've been participating in the session like 56 minutes now or 1 hour, right? But and in a way that's true, but it's like every moment of us is different. So when we say that, when we generate the idea of, oh, myself that's been in this participating in the session for 56 minutes, what we're doing is actually observing a whole series of moments of a person. Each one is different, but they're each similar enough to each other that we label one person on that. And that's what we do over the continuum of our life. If someone asks, how old are you? And we say, oh, yes, I'm so and so years old, there's an idea that, well, I existed from this time until now. But like every day of us is different than the next. But we associate, it's like by the force of association, we associate all those together and then create a kind of story of one person. And on a smaller scale, we do that, every moment. But then the problem is we have a sense of, I mean, that's all fine, but we have a sense of, well, there actually is one person, right? It's not, I mean, it's not that we're two or three or four or five people, but like what, it's not so much we have, the problem is we have a sense of one person, but that there is one kind of autonomous essence to us as a person that is not changing, and exists totally by its own from its own side, by its own power. Um, yeah, one phrase I find very helpful in the Buddhist description of the process of cause and effect is other powered. Um, So when we think about, something, anything that's produced by causes and conditions, then it's called an other powered phenomena, right? Which means it's produced by things that are other than it, right? So even if we take us, ourself in the present moment, we're something other than the us that existed just, 1 second ago or 5 seconds ago, right? The I that existed 5 seconds ago is different than the one that exists now. And so the I that exists now has been produced by that other, right? Scott, you have your hand up?
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I wanted to ask this Buddhist definition of permanent as not changing. It really the logic works very well for selflessness because it's very easy to defeat. That of course, it's changing. But the word permanent, when I find that this word doesn't mean that often to people when I try to make this argument because we tend to think of permanent that there's a kind of permanence that something can change, but that it never ceases to exist, for example. So I was just wondering if you've thought about that or heard those counter arguments, because I find a lot of people scratch their heads when I use this logic and they say, well, that's not exactly what permanent means, is it not changing?
Yes, yeah. I mean, even in Buddhist texts, the word permanent, tatpa in Tibetan,
Mm,
it's used in both of those ways.
mm,
To mean, I mean, the formal definition of permanent is choran keji wo maya mishitumba, is something that is a phenomena that is not momentarily changing, just as you described in the first way, the first meaning, which is a common meaning we use in Buddhism. But you see in text also that's the same word, permanent, is also used to mean something that exists always. It exists in the past, it exists now, and exists in the future. And even though it's changing, like samsara, you could think sometimes samsara could be talked about like permanent. It's changing, but it's always existed. It exists now, and it always exists in the future, and so it's permanent in that way, in that it always exists. Yeah, yeah, permanent can be used that way, and I think in English parlance is true. I've had the same experience as you. That oftentimes I'm explaining to people, and from an English speaking background, then yeah, the idea of permanence is more the second meaning.
mm.
Something always exists. Um, but then still the question comes, well, um, but what is it? What's the nature of that thing that always exists? Like in relation to us as a person, I mean, for most people, like we don't always exist. We just exist from the moment of conception up till death. Like for many, many people, right? Um, but still, I think that logic, like I mentioned, Hume. I mean, also Buddhist scholars use that, like, yeah, it's still an instance of clearly like we're giving a label to a whole continuum of change, for a certain phenomena. That phenomena is changing. Um, and yeah, and within that, but the problem, yeah, I don't know. The problem on one hand is not so much, yeah, you don't know what's the challenge, the nature of the challenge that you feel like comes up when people say that.
Well, I think they would argue that something could never cease to exist and yet still be changed. Could be changed in effect. Like you could imagine a self that never ceases to exist, that forever exists, but that does change in response to causes and effects and so on, right?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's what Buddhists assert,
Yeah,
no?
yeah.
Because actually, as I mean, the Buddhists assert that each individual person, so like each of us here, for example, we each exist in our own continuum.
Hmm.
Like my karma doesn't ripen up on you, your karma doesn't ripen up on me. My mind doesn't become your mental continuum, your mind doesn't become mine. We each have an individual stream of consciousness flowing through time. And then that consciousness, as we take rebirth, the consciousness moves from body to body, right? Leaves one body at the time of death and takes rebirth in another body, and then grows and then dies. But that stream of consciousness has no beginning. One individual person's stream of consciousness has no beginning. And then especially in the Mahayana school, then that stream of consciousness also has no end.
Mhm.
It goes up, it eventually becomes enlightened, and then continues. And that's the basis. That's the main basis for labeling the person
Mhm.
upon that. So upon that basis of that continually changing stream of consciousness, and then conjoined with different bodies, in different lives,
Mhm.
then we label a person. And so, yeah, there's no problem with that. It's in that way it continually exists, but yet it's changing moment to moment, like a river.
Thank you. Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah. But let's meditate a bit more. Um, yeah. Let's try it this way. Okay, so since we spent quite some time just looking at how um, uh, yeah, maybe I should mention first of all, like, just it's not that actually um, there are, I mean, in a way that's like they're not physical parts of our body that are not changing, but there are characteristics. You could say there are facts about our body that are not changing. There are facts about our mind that are not changing. For example, if like the fact that we have, if you have, say, 10 fingers and 10 toes or 2 arms, like that fact is not changing moment by moment. But I mean, that's not especially important. And it's not, uh, um, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter much, but in case that does arise, like there are facts, like the fact that, oh, um, one's mind exists. That's not changing moment to moment, right? Or the fact that one, as a person, one is empty of inherent existence. That's also not changing moment to moment. So it's not that there's nothing about us that is not changing. There are some things, but they're all these kind of abstract truths in a way. But let's go back to uh, actually try to identify, um, when we don't, because in the till now we've been looking at the aspect of dependent origination of us as something that depends upon causes and conditions, right? In each moment, we're continually arising and transforming in dependence upon causes and conditions, and we are cause in each moment, producing effects, right? And then in terms of time, like our past is gone, our future has not yet arisen, and in the present moment, we're like a river flowing. We're continually changing. So that's dependence upon causes and conditions. So now let's look at dependence upon parts, right? The second type of dependent origination, right? There's 3 types of dependent origination: things existing in dependence upon causes and conditions, things existing in dependence upon parts, and things existing in dependence upon mental imputation. So let's just look, for a moment at, as a person, how we exist in dependence upon parts. So first, we can think of, that again, we'll start with the body. That we exist in dependence upon, as the person that we are now in this life, we exist in dependence upon having this human body, right? Even though, we have past lives, we have future lives. The stream of consciousness flows from life to life and inhabits different bodies, different types of bodies, and different lives. The reason we say I'm a human being, I have a human rebirth now, is because our stream of consciousness has conjoined with the egg and a sperm cell of our parents at the time of conception in this life. and we've, and then those cells reproduced and increased in number, and then we formed, we formed a human body, essentially. So now we have a human body, and we identify strongly with that. So that body is one part of us, and then all the parts of that body, our hands, our head, again, our organs, our skin, our muscles, bones, cells, all the atoms, they're all parts. They're parts of our body, and therefore they're parts of us as a person. So just, yeah, just look through that for a moment, a minute or two, thinking about how all the parts of one's body are parts of oneself as a person. But now let's ask a slightly different question. Is we can ask in regard to the body. Why don't we start with the parts of the body? Like if we think of your say your hands or one of your hands. So with regard to that hand, we can think, okay, on the one hand, is this a part of me? Yes, it's a part of me. Right? Our feet are a part of us. Our skin is a part of, of oneself. But then we can ask a slightly different question. Is your hand you? Right? We can ask, is any part of my body, is it me? So we can, say, is my arm me? So here, and then we can even think, in my whole body, is my whole body me? So here, we have to say no, right? It's like, because there's a difference between being part of us and being us. And one of the main reasons is because I, the person, and so think this in relation to yourself, right? I'm modeling how to kind of analyze this. But the person, is the possessor of my hand. That's why I say my hand, because it belongs to me. I possess it. My arm, you say my arm because it belongs to me. I'm different from my arm and I'm the owner of the arm. I'm the one who possesses that part, my arm. It's the same with my nose, my eyes. So if we ask, is my nose me? No, because it's a part of me. Something that's a part of me cannot be the possessor of that part, right? The part and the one who possesses those parts, they're different. Right? So then we come to the question, well, is my body me? On the one hand, it seems like it is because we very closely identify with and associate with our body. But um, well, on the one hand, if our body was us, then it would mean at the time that we die and our heart stops beating, therefore our blood stops circulating, our brain stops functioning, and then all our cells begin to decompose, then also we as a person, we would stop functioning, right? Just as our body becomes is say incinerated in a morgue or something, then we as a person also we would be incinerated, right? So there would be no rebirth. Absolutely. But also, if the body was me, it would also mean that I don't have a mind. Because our body is something physical, right? Um, whereas our mind, consciousness is not something physical. So just because people can see, people can know everything possible about our body. They could see it, they could touch it, they could smell it, they could weigh it, measure it, do CAT scans on it, see all the internal parts, take all kinds of measurements about our body. But what do they know about our mind? Almost nothing, no. No matter how much they know about our body, know almost nothing about our mind. So clearly, like, if we are our body, then just as our body doesn't possess a mind in a way, then we wouldn't possess a mind. But clearly, we're thinking about that, so we have a mind, right? So yeah, think about that for a minute. How no part of our body is us, and our entire body is not us, is not I, the person. It's something I possess. I have a body. So therefore I'm something different from the body that I possess. And yeah. Mhm. And then we can look at our mind in the same way, right? Think how all the different parts of our conscious experience, our memories, our physical perceptions, our visual perceptions, our ear consciousness, hearing sounds, and thoughts that we have, feelings that arise. They're all parts of us, just like parts of our body are parts of us. All these different conscious experiences that arise from moment to moment. Think how they're a part of oneself. But then we can ask oneself, am I any of those? Like a particular thought arises, um, is that me? Right? This is different from, is it a part of me? Yes, but is it me? No, because if any, like one particular thought or feeling, that arose, if that was me, then that would mean I would only arise when that thought or feeling arises, and when that thought or feeling passes away, I also would pass away. So clearly, it's not, any thought we have, it's not me. Any feeling I arise, it's part of me, but it's not me. I am something different from that. Again, because I'm the one who has that thought. It's my thought. It's my feeling, my memory. So therefore, there's an I that possesses that has that. We can even think about our mind, our entire mind in that way. Like, well, maybe a better way to think is we can ask ourselves, is my mind me? Or vice versa, am I my mind? So if my mind is me, then it means I'm the same thing as my mind, right? There's no difference. The same, if I'm my mind is me, then we're the same thing. But if my mind is me, then it would mean just as um, well, just as no other person can see my mind, no one can see me, right? Because it would be like there's no difference between me and my mind. So no one else could see me or touch me. It would also mean it would mean like in short all the physical things that our body does, then we don't do, right? Because our mind doesn't do those things. It would mean like I don't wear clothes. I don't stand up or sit down because my body is doing those things. I mean, like now we're sitting, probably sitting in a chair. So if I'm my mind, then we'd have to say, well, my mind is sitting in the chair, right? But that doesn't really make any sense because sitting in a chair requires, you know, having a body. So in essence, like our mind, we don't say it's my mind's body, right? Our mind doesn't have a body. As a person, we have a body, we have a mind. So our mind and our body are each parts of us, but I'm not my body and I'm not my mind. I'm the one who owns, who possesses, the one who has a body and a mind. So in that way, we depend upon parts. No, our body and all the parts of our body are parts of us. Mind and all the parts of our mind are parts of us. We're the one that possesses all of those parts. But then the big question is, but where is that person who possesses the body but is not the body? Where is the person that possesses the mind but is not the mind? If we imagine like separating ourselves from our body and our mind, like put the body, one's own body and mind in like one room and then go to another room. Or push one's mind and body off to one side of the room and then, look somewhere else. Like what else is there to us as a person? Can we, separate out our body and mind and then find something that is the essential I that possesses the body and mind that remains independent of those. Mm. So here we come to the third type of dependent arising of imputation, existence in dependence upon mental imputation. So it's quite clear that, if we separate, you know, separate out our body and mind and then look someplace else for the I, something else that we can point to that is the I. There isn't anything else. Like what else is there that we can point to and say this the I that possesses the body and mind? There's no other part to us, right? Except all the parts of our body, all the parts of our mind. And yet it's not that we don't exist. Like clearly we exist. We're sitting here thinking about this. So then how we exist is as a dependent arising, as something labeled upon. We observe the parts of our body and have the thought, my body. So like, for example, when someone touches us, we think, oh, they're touching me. When our body is seated in a chair, we think, I'm sitting. When we see ourselves in a photo, we say, there's me, or in a mirror. So upon the body, like when we do physical actions, like when we're walking, we think I'm walking. We don't think my body is walking, right? So we're associating we're observing our body, and then upon the independence upon the body, labeling I at some times. And then at other times, more independence upon the mind, when we see, different thoughts arising, we imagine different things, think about the past. When we do different things with our mind, or different things occur in our mind, then we say, I'm thinking, I'm remembering this, I'm imagining this in the future, I'm feeling this way. So at those times, we label the I more primarily upon the mind. So the I, the person, exists as something, labeled upon. It's like we have an idea, basically, of a self. We observe the different parts of our body and different actions and functions of our body and of our mind, even though they're changing continually moment by moment, but because they're similar, they're part of the same continuum. So there's a pattern of similarity to their change. And upon that, we label I, and we have an idea of a self that's unchanging through time, an essence to a self, an essence to the I. Mm. Okay, relax your attention now. Sorry, we went a bit long. Um, but this is a very helpful way to meditate now. Again, your homework for the week to try to meditate a bit on this question: what am I as a person? But I'd suggest you start with um, thinking of some ordinary situations in life when there's a very strong sense of I arises. Like sometimes someone accuses us of something, we feel defensive, or when we're suddenly the object of many people's attention. And we feel self-conscious. Or sometimes when we're suddenly afraid, then there's a strong sense of I arises. And then look for that I. Look through all the parts of the body. Are any of those that I? All the parts of the mind, any of those that I? Is there something separate from the body and mind? That is the I. And then when you see how, there isn't, then abide in that, kind of relax in that kind of recognition that there is no concrete kind of self. Yeah, or just meditate like we were, looking through how, becoming more and more familiar with how, as a person, we're dependent arising. We're changing moment by moment, and we're made up of infinite amount of parts. Each of those is changing moment by moment. Each of those is causes, and also you think other causes, things external to the body, are causes of us moment by moment. The warmth of the sun, the light we experience, the sounds that we hear, different vibrations that pass through our body all the time, different molecules and atoms passing through our body all the time, different ideas that we hear from other people and so forth that transform us. Okay, yeah. Sorry I didn't leave any time for questions. Actually, let's dedicate now. If any of you want to stick around afterwards and ask some questions, I can stick around for a bit, answer. But for those of who need to go, then let's dedicate. Yeah, thank you. Rejoicing in whatever merit we've created through this session. And then rejoicing in the merit of countless other people like us throughout the world who engage in different activities that with a benevolent intention. And then, of course, all the lineage masters back to Shakyamuni Buddha himself. We rejoice. So, by the force of all this virtue that we and others have created, then may we and others be free from every form of suffering and the cause of suffering. And especially be free from the ignorance that leads us into disappointment and conflict and selfishness, into harmful actions again and again and again. May we and others be completely free from this ignorance and rather generate this deep understanding of dependent origination and our deep connectedness with others, and thereby generate a mind of loving kindness and compassion for others with whom our lives are interconnected. In short, may all beings be well in every way, in body and mind. And bring to mind any other prayers that you yourself would like to make for yourself, or your friends or family, or other causes in the world. May also all those virtuous prayers of yours be accomplished exactly in accordance with your wishes. Okay, thank you all, and see you next week. Next week I'll be back in person at Land of Medicine Buddha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geshe. This was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.
Did any of you have questions?
I have a question.
Sure, Joe.
I was wondering, whether Buddhists, so you talk a lot about an individual stream of consciousness that goes from lifetime to lifetime. I'm wondering, do Buddhists believe that, believe in unity consciousness, that all of our individual strands are, so a bit like, so if you're talking about, quantum physics, where you've got the particle and the wave, and both exist, both are true, exist as a particle and a wave. And in my interpretation is that it's just the context that determines whether something is a particle or a wave. So I'm wondering whether Buddhists believe that all the individual streams of consciousness are at the same time one whole, a unity consciousness.
No. Buddhists don't. No, in Buddhism, there's no explanation like that all the different streams of consciousness are one whole unified consciousness. Because, because in one way, it's like when you look at like an example of a whole unified consciousness, like you think of our own consciousness, like it's in a way it's unified. Like we see things and then we can think about those things, we hear things, we have memories, we have plans for the future. So like as an individual, we have a whole variety of different consciousness, but they're all kind of part of the same stream of consciousness and part of the same thing, right? But then why are we different individuals? Because like you don't have the same. If I tell you about what I'm thinking, then you have some rough idea, but you can't directly see my thoughts, right? Or I don't directly see your thoughts. Even if I had clairvoyance, which Buddhists do describe, different kinds of clairvoyance where we can read another person's thoughts, it's not the same as like being that person, experiencing their own thoughts and feelings from within being the person who's having them, right? It's more like you're looking at. So the idea is that the argument against the Buddhist reasoning, like why there's no one unified consciousness, is because we don't experience the thoughts, like we don't all experience thoughts, together. We don't all share the same experiences, right? It seems like they're different individual streams. But it's not that they're disconnected. Like they're very much, we affect each other's thoughts and feelings for sure. But yeah, and another way that this is spoken about is because there's the question: when we're born from our parents, do our minds come from our parents? Do our stream of consciousness come from our parents' stream of consciousness? But then the reasoning usually used to say no is that because then we should have memories of our parents' experiences like before we were born, right? If our streams of consciousness came from our parents, then just as our parents in their streams of consciousness, they have memories of things that happened before we were born, we should also have access to that because we're part of the same stream of consciousness, right?
Mhm.
But
I'm
that's not the case.
I'm wondering whether it could be a case of while we're in samsara, it's a relative view that we're all, all of these streams of consciousness are separate. However, beyond samsara, it might be possible that there is a unity consciousness. So again, relative and ultimate truth.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of, not so much discussion, but there's disagreement among different Buddhist scholars about what happens when we become enlightened. So when we become beyond samsara, like you're talking about, and we become enlightened, and so enlightenment. One main characteristic of enlightenment is all obscurations to our mind's ability to know are completely cleared away. Right. So our consciousness expands in every possible way in terms of knowing phenomena, also in terms of compassion and positive qualities, but in terms of this knowing phenomena. So then, if that's the case, then there's no difference between enlightened beings, what one knows versus another. Like now, like you know stuff about what your house looks like and feels like, and I know stuff about the room where I look like. And so in that way, like we're very different, right? And individuals have different experiences that are separate from each other. But you think about an enlightened being, they all know everything that's possible to know. So all of their experiences are identical, basically, right?
So yes, as I say, in samsara, we experience ourselves as separate, as individual, but beyond that, it seems that, as you say, every enlightened beings, it's just one for them.
Yeah, but that's still different than being one. I mean, their experience is identical, so it's very close, but it's still they each have their own pasts, right? When each of them would consider their own past lives and they see a different story, right? They each have their own story that led up to them being enlightened, right? So it's still quite. Also, there's a question of if there's just one consciousness, like because consciousness is something that, as far as we can see, it's like it's possessed by individuals. But yeah.
But
Anyway,
once you
it's a big question. It's a big
but
question, though, and yeah.
once you become enlightened, there's no
Mhm.
past, is there? There's no karma's gone. So it's there's no that there's the past becomes, you can't affect them.
I don't know. I don't know. It's a big
Something
question.
to think about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Stan, you have your
Yeah,
hand up?
real briefly tonight, you mentioned samsara is impermanent. I mean,
Mhm.
it is permanent. And
No. It's impermanent. It's impermanent, and then it's changing moment by moment.
yes,
Because so that came up in the discussion of these two different ways to use the word permanent.
right, right,
And so I was saying, yes, samsara is impermanent in that it's changing moment by moment.
right.
But sometimes we speak about it being permanent in the second sense of permanent, that it exists always. It has existed, it always exists, basically.
Right. And so that's where my confusion came up just for a moment is that
Mhm.
I assume in the cosmological scheme of things, samsara will end someday. The bodhisattvas
Yes.
will win and
Yeah.
everyone will be enlightened and there will be no more samsara. That's
Yes. Yeah. The good guys win in the end. Yeah. But when that will happen is like anyone's guess.
right, right.
Yeah.
Well,
No. And the reason for that is because if we look at one individual person's samsara, right? An individual person's samsara arises based on ignorance, based on a misunderstanding. And because the fundamental cause is a misunderstanding, it's possible to clear that away, right? To totally eliminate that misunderstanding in a way that it never arises again. Once
right.
one is aware of the truth, right? And so one individual person's samsara can be eliminated, and that possibility is there for every individual. Then yes, eventually everyone will meet the conditions such that they develop the wisdom to eliminate the root cause of their own samsara, right? So yes, eventually samsara will come to an end. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Buddha never bothered to tell us what's after that because it wasn't a concern. We're not there.
That's the big question that naturally arises. Well, then what?
Yeah, right. Uh,
Yeah.
I remember the story of him talking about walking through a forest and picking up a handful of leaves and says, this is what I've told you about, but this all the leaves in this forest is what I know about. So I'm only telling you what you need to know. And
Mhm.
so it's like that, I guess.
Yeah. It's like that. Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
You're welcome, Stan. Jai? Jai, you had your hand up?
Apologies, I forgot to turn the mic on. Okay, from a Buddhist point of view, what is the response to the eternal question, who am I?
Well, the short answer is I am something labeled upon my body and mind. could say.
And what goes on then? My body doesn't go on. Does my mind go on?
Yeah, the mind goes on from this life to next life, you mean?
And then once I have reached total enlightenment, is it still my mind is there or not?
Yes. Yeah, it's
Okay.
primarily our mind. And
Okay.
there's subtle physical energy that goes with the mind that goes on to enlightenment. But there's a continuum of us as a person. Like as a person, we're something labeled upon the collection of body and mind. At the time of death, our stream of consciousness separates
Mhm.
from the body of this life. And so then as a person, we're still something labeled upon that
Mhm.
stream of consciousness. So there's also a continuum of us as a person that exists independence upon our the stream of consciousness that goes from life to life and goes up to enlightenment itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This
Even
is
even Jai, maybe just to maybe I don't know if this make it clear, but even when we think, because we think about stream of consciousness, but then what is that also? That's like it's a series of individual moments, because there's change, right? Every moment the consciousness is changing, but because it happens in a patterned way, then we label upon each of those individual moments of consciousness, we label my stream of consciousness, right?
yeah.
But it's also something that's labeled upon parts that are unfolding through time in a way. So, but the person is similarly, it's labeled upon the stream of consciousness.
Yeah. If I could, I do have another question. That would be all
Sure.
right. Yep. Which is, I'm aware from a Buddhist point of view, it's like we've had, it seems like squillions of lifetimes in various manifestations, right?
Mhm.
It's like it's difficult for me to, and if you've got any advice on this, I would appreciate it. It's difficult for me to sort of think it's all too hard. I want to give up, you know, because I know
Yeah.
I'm going to be back as a worm, and for how many lifetimes. And this whole, it's just like I find that the multiplicity overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, that's not uncommon. I think many people feel that way at some point. Um, what I find in the past when I felt that way, what I find helpful is maybe two things I can say. One is to think, because sometimes, yeah, when you think, okay, but the past lifetimes, okay, they're past, right? It's the future lifetimes that are like the danger, right? That are frustrating to think. And also when we see how difficult it is for us to change as a person, how slowly we change. And the immensity of karma, that this baggage of karma we're carrying from the past lives, which is like, who knows, it's like what karma is going to ripen when, it's impossible to tell. um but one thing I find helpful is to think, well, if I just give up and I don't do anything, I just let nature take its course, and I don't really try to make any effort to be any particular way. I just kind of follow my instincts. Then I'll take rebirth again, and then I'll do that, and then I'll take rebirth again and again, and there's no end to that process. If we just let karma arise and then we just act by whatever instincts arise, and we don't try to kind of improve our situation in any way, then the process of dying, taking rebirth, dying and taking rebirth through the force of karma and afflictive emotions is that's definitely endless, right? That has no end, right? But of course, I mean, I've come to that conclusion by thinking about, well, why do we experience suffering? Is it karma or not? Why do we have karma? Is it afflictions or not? So we have to think carefully through, can we find better explanations for all those things? But in my in my whatever my worldview, yeah, the Buddhist explanation is the best. So according to that, like there's no end. So better than endless suffering and samsara is, just applying what effort I can, right, to develop wisdom, compassion, renunciation, moral, altruistic gratitude. In the meantime, even though I don't see progress, but the little that I do, yeah, I find it's beneficial. It's happy. It's beneficial now, and it kind of. And then the second thing I was thinking is that I find helpful is just to know, just to feel like sometimes I'm pointing myself in the right direction, right? Even though the end result might be, infinite lifetimes in the future, if I just keep heading in the right direction, eventually I'll be free from samsara, right? So those two things.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, last question.
Um, I'm moving towards thinking that our individual and collective belief in the existence of samsara is what's making it continue. Because if we apply, the logic that we do to our individual selves, our wrong views, if we extend it to the whole of samsara, then is it possible that by believing in its existence that we're actually prolonging, we're making it continue because we believe in it.
You're sharing, or you want me to?
I'm saying that's where I'm at, and I'm wondering what your take is. And you may not want to answer or be able to in the time. So that's
Well,
just where I'm at.
I mean, there are definitely places where because we believe something, it causes it to be, and especially with regard to low self-esteem. Like, like if we believe we can't do something, then that almost guarantees that we will never be able to do that. No, that it's like self-defeating. No. So there are cases where just because we believe something, that belief itself perpetuates the existence of for me, a clear example is like that, like a kind of inability. If I think I'm incapable of do something, like I'm incapable to speak a second language or play a musical instrument or bake a cake or something, then that thought itself ensures that that will be true, right? But I don't think, I think in many other cases, it's not the case that you know, like a classic one is if I'm on the roof of a fifth-story building, and if I think, well, if I just don't think I'm going to fall, then, or don't think that I'll fall when I jump off, then I won't. Like I still will, right? Like whether I believe I'm going to fall or not is like irrelevant. Like they're principles of physics that just guarantee that when I step off the roof of the building, I'm going to fall, right? And so, yeah, I think we just have to distinguish. And then, well, okay, so what about samsara? Then is samsara like the first one, the kind of things that if we believe it, that perpetuate itself, if we don't believe it, then we can be free from it? Or is it like the second one, right? I think it's more like the second one, in my opinion, that I don't think samsara, there is definitely a role of, I mean, especially like in the view of Buddhist Tantra, like one thing that keeps us in samsara is identifying with the state of being in samsara, basically. So that is a big hindrance, like that identification with, of like, if we think I'm fundamentally flawed, like I fundamentally am I don't know, disturbed or confused person, then that itself is a huge obstacle to being free from samsara, right? So in the view of Buddhist Tantra, like the essence of the practice is to identify with our positive qualities, right? Yes, we have negative qualities, we have positive qualities, but identifying with our negative qualities is a huge obstacle. So we need to identify with our positive qualities. So we meditate on wisdom, and then imagine like I am a wisdom being, right? And totally disassociate from our, I mean, in a healthy way, from our drawbacks, right? Our faults. And that makes us progress much more quickly on the path by identifying or generating compassion and then imagining I am the embodiment of compassion, right? So very, very strongly identifying with positive qualities is like the quickest way to further develop those, right?
And to forget yourself, forget your, the illusion that.
Yeah, and that's a big part of like what we're meditating on the things tonight is to try to break down this concrete, idea of self that we have and realize the self is actually something much more flexible and changeable than we ordinarily think.